Today, I want to take a closer look at a preset that I put together for a really good client of mine. He's actually been back a few times, and I've done several mics for him in several different configurations, referring to a custom preset that I've made for him. He's from the Netherlands. Ruben had me put together a custom processing chain for him with some special requests this last time, and those are he wanted to use the Universal Audio only plugin. So he's got a TLM 103, this is the mic that he's using, and he wanted to go through his Universal Audio Apollo preamp, and he wanted to use only Universal Audio plugins for the preset chain. Mostly because, for a couple reasons. He likes the platform, but he also wants to have the option of doing the processing in real time. And I think that really is the leverage of using the Universal Audio plugin if you're using just specifically UAD plugins. Now, he also wants to take advantage of the Unison preamp modeling, which is where some of the Universal Audio plugins are actually software models of the preamp, and they have to be in the Unison position. But it's just another way that Universal Audio is replicating the sound from some really classic pre's, like the Avalon 737 here on the bottom. So what I want to first do is I'm going to bypass everything. We're going to shut all these processors off. These are the three, and I'll walk through what each of these are doing and the order and why I've used them. And let's just listen to his voice unprocessed. This is his TLM 103 going directly to the mic pre of the Apollo interface, but there's no Unison plugin and there's no processing. So this is just raw, clean pre TLM 103 right into the Apollo.
But now, as she made her way through the thick vegetation, she could feel the warmth of the sun shining through the leaves. She was searching for the ancient temple of the goddess Arathia, which was said to hold a magic deep underground that she desperately needed to protect her people.
So one of the requests that he has given me is that he wants natural. He wants a very natural sound. He doesn't want to hear the compression. He doesn't want any of the processing to take the lead role. He really just wants it transparent and natural. That's what he's going for. And I will say that his room is very well treated. He's got a professional sound panels in his room, and he's got a booth, and he's done a really good job of getting a good recording to start with, which allows the processing to just optimize and sweeten everything up. And when I do custom processing presets at a package that I do for someone, I send strength levels. So we'll do like a tone-only version, which is just really only balancing. Then we'll do a mild version, which has a little bit of compression. It's just a mild processing. And then I'll do a heavier version. So I tried for each of the strength levels that I provided Ruben to keep them all very natural. And I'm using the heaviest version of the processing because I want you to hear the difference. So the other strength levels are less processing than this. So although he wants to use a Unison preamp, I still need to do the processing by going into a parametric EQ first to correct and balance out any resonance issues that I'm hearing in the room. And that's how I attack a sound. And because I have experience doing this for quite a while, I'm drawn right to those resonances when I hear audio unprocessed for the first time. And I think that's something, I think it takes time and it takes a little bit of patience to draw your ear to know what to listen for. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play his audio again, and I'm going to turn on, I'll activate and deactivate and activate again the EQ. And we're dropping some of the low and mid frequencies to balance it out. And then we're adding 2.1 dB of gain again to level this out. And this is, by the way, this is the UAD Massenburg Design Works EQ. It's a 5-band parametric EQ. Out of all of the parametric EQs, I think there's only 3 of them from Universal Audio. This is the one I prefer. And so let's listen to without, and then you'll hear the difference and what I've done with the balancing for the frequencies, which is already pretty good. I mean, he's got a great sound, but I think you'll hear the difference.
But now, as she made her way through the thick vegetation, she could feel the warmth of the sun shining through the leaves. She was searching for the ancient temple of the goddess Arathia, which was said to hold a magic deep underground that she desperately needed to protect her people. She was no ordinary elf. Her hair was as black as night, and her eyes were as bright blue as a thunderstorm.
So really, it's the 345 hertz, I think, is where most of that resonance is, and I'm dipping it at about just 4 dB. So it's not a lot, but it really balances things out. So the amount of energy that I'm taking out, and there's a couple, 179, and there's a really low resonance, and he has a low voice in the 83 hertz, which is pretty low, just to balance the power out. And you could see by reducing the power in those specific frequency ranges, I have returned about that much energy by increasing the gain in the input level going into the Massenburg EQ. So when I turn this on and off, you don't hear a volume change. You can just barely hear that tone change. So it doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is. You'll understand and you can hear it better after you add more processing. And I do even more EQ in the following plugin, which is the UAD AMS Neve DFC channel strip. I love it because it has, first of all, it's got everything. It's got an EQ, it's got a filter, it's got a de-esser. It's actually a dynamic filter, which is I use as a de-esser. A compressor, it's got a limiter, expander gate, and it's all really designed for dialogue. So I really like this plugin, and let's listen to it now. We're going to keep the Massenburg EQ engaged. I'm going to engage now the AMS Neve DFC channel strip.
As she made her way through the thick vegetation, she could feel the warmth of the sun shining through the leaves. She was searching for the ancient temple of the goddess Arathia, which was said to hold a magic deep underground that she desperately needed to protect her people. She was no ordinary elf. Her hair was as black as night, and her eyes were as bright blue as a thunderstorm.
I'm sure there was further balancing that you were aware of and you heard in the AMS Neve DFC channel strip plugin. So I do even more. Let's switch to the EQ. This EQ band here, EQ band number 2. So it's in the 425 space. There is probably the most prevalent type of resonance in his voice. I could have used the Massenburg to drop out the 425 frequency band, but I just decided to do it in here. I've bumped up the 2.2K, a very wide band, just to give it some clarity. And I'm using the high pass filter here on the AMS Neve DFC to drop off just the low end. And here's what I like to do. I like to use just one high pass filter in the entire chain. I usually like to use it as early as possible in the chain, but he doesn't have a huge problem with noise or low frequency issue. So we're just using a 12 dB per octave slope and at 48, almost 50 hertz. So it's pretty low down there just to take out the really low stuff. I really do like the expander gate. It's very natural. And I guess, again, it's probably because it's just designed for dialogue. So I really like that one. So that is now the AMS Neve DFC together with the Massenburg DesignWorks EQ. And it sounds pretty good. One of the things that he really wanted to do, one of the things that Ruben really wanted, was the vibe of the Avalon 737. I've put the Avalon at the end of the chain because I want to use the Avalon's compressor, mostly the compressor, and give it that weight. I think that's a really good description of what the Avalon does for voice. It's a tube-based unit that is designed to give audio a warmth and a roundness, but I think weight is actually a really good description. It's a good adjective to describe what it does for voices. So I wanted to make sure that we used the compressor, but I wanted to put it on last because I want to compress and I want to add weight to the balanced sound, which means post Massenburg EQ and post EQ in the AMS Neve channel strip. And I know that's in the scheme of things, that's a small little change, but it's the way that I prefer, and I believe it sounds the best. I like adding a sweetening type of compressor, which is really just 1 to 2 dB of reduction. I love adding that at the very end, and I think the Avalon does a great job of giving it that weight and not coloring the sound too much. It just makes it bigger and heavier and commands your attention, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's keep, by the way, if you just click on the Avalon logo, it will change the color. So that's why it was looking funky there, if you were wondering. All right, so let me run down actually what we're doing. We are using just a touch of EQ. I'm adding a little bit of bass, dropping the low mids in the 250 hertz range, just a 1 to 2 dB in the highs. And then in the air, I'm adding quite a bit of air with this here. And I'm using the EQ before the compressor. Again, the compressor is going on at the very end. So let's listen to Ruben's voice again with the Massenburg DesignWorks parametric EQ active, the AMS Neve DFC channel strip active, it's activated, and then I will add in the Avalon here at the end of the chain.
But now, as she made her way through the thick vegetation, she could feel the warmth of the sun shining through the leaves. She was searching for the ancient temple of the goddess Arathia, which was said to hold a magic deep underground that she desperately needed to protect her people. She was no ordinary elf. Her hair was as black as night, and her eyes were as bright blue as a thunderstorm.
Let's listen to the audio now, and I'll add each of the plugins one at a time here.
She was leaner and faster than any of the other elves in her tribe, and she had a fearlessness that sometimes bordered on recklessness. As she approached the temple, she felt her heart rate quicken. The entrance was partially hidden behind a wall of stones and roots, but she knew it had to be here. She drew her dagger from her belt and cut away the roots. It was an old trick she had learned from an ancient wise woman, and it worked perfectly.
Well, you can see that each one of the changes that the processing is doing, the EQ by itself, it's doing just a little bit. The EQ and compression and the gating that the AMS Neve DFC channel strip does is just a little bit, but when they're added together, it makes a big difference in the sound. And then, boy, I am really not, and this is the heaviest. Remember, I mentioned this is the heaviest version. You don't have to do a lot to make a big change. All of this only matters when you have a well-treated room and there's no noise in your room and you've got a pretty well-balanced recording to begin with, meaning that you have professional absorbing panels. I mean, Ruben works at the higher end of a lot of my clients, and as far as his quality goes, I mean, I think this may be one of the best sounding recordings for voiceover that I've worked with. But you should know that this is what that level sounds like, and you can see that his initial recording, his original recording before any processing, sounds very good. It definitely has a lot to do with a quiet space and having proper acoustic treatment. In the description below, I'm going to have a blog post that I've written, and I don't know if you've read it before, but it's all about acoustics. It describes the problem and also describes the solution, so you can strive and move toward getting a sound like an original sound like the level that Ruben has here that we've heard. One of the requests that Ruben had was he wanted to be able to use the Avalon preamp, the 737, in the Unison position. So I want to just point this out to you. I'm still using the Avalon compressor and just barely a touch of EQ at the end of the chain. And I would have him add in the Unison slot another instance of the Avalon 737 if he wants to use and add that in his recording while he's recording. But I would have him only use the preamp, no compression, no EQ, otherwise it's going to ruin what's happening further down the chain. So he can use the Avalon tube preamp, but I would only use the preamp and that Unison modeling. And what it likely would do would just add a little bit of saturation if he wanted to add that before. I think it sounds fantastic as it is, but if he wanted to add a little bit of saturation, which also gives a little more of a processed type of sound and warm things up a little bit further. But he has the ability to do that, and he could cycle through the strength levels depending upon what kind of a presentation that he's doing. So I wanted to give you just a peek inside what I've done for him. It's an interesting setup just because it's all Universal Audio. But I think it's one of the ones that sounds the best, primarily because he has a fantastic sounding room, and I appreciate him letting me use this to show you and illustrate and just kind of taking you inside his processing preset chain. And one of the things I do is I can send you an example of what your voiceover sound is like processed with my custom processing. All you have to do is there's a form and you send me some audio raw. You send me some raw audio and I'll send you back an example of what it sounds like processed. Or at the very least, I'll explain to you, hey, here are the things that you need to fix before you can get processing that'll improve the quality of your voice. So by all means, I'll have that link in the description as well. Send your voice, hear what it sounds like. The worst thing that can happen is you could learn something and it'll actually move you toward improving your sound and reaching your goal. And that's what I love to do, is help anybody that's especially using their voice, but all content creators, make a better connection with their audience. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. Thanks for watching.
Hi Lenny, this is Ruben from the Netherlands. I just wanted to reach out and tell you how happy I am with the preset you provided. To me, it is as exciting as having a new microphone that is precisely tailored to my voice and room. Being happy with the way I sound just gets me in a mindset that makes for a better and more creative performance, so thank you very much.